There are very strange moments in life when everything seems to be standing still, yet deep inside you there is a feeling you can hardly name, as if a new chapter is waiting ahead. Even though there are no clear signs, you no longer fit with what once felt familiar. But you have not stepped into anything new either. You only know that something is shifting quietly, silently, but surely. In the psychology of Machiavelli, before every leap of consciousness, the unconscious will send signals first. Not loud, not dazzling, just small changes in the way you feel, choose, and respond to life. And if you are seeing this video, it may not be a coincidence. You may be standing exactly at the boundary where your old version has completed its role, and the victorious version of you is preparing to be born. In today's video, we will walk through the 7 clearest signs that you are stepping into the winning phase of your life. Not winning over anyone else, but winning over the version of yourself that once held you back. Stay until the end because you may realize that the shift you've been waiting for began long before you knew it. Are you ready to step into your own winning chapter? Number 1, when your energy rejects what no longer belongs to you. There are moments in life that look small, quiet, almost ordinary, yet they carry a very large message. Like when you're doing something familiar and your heart suddenly skips a beat. Like when you look at someone you used to exhaust yourself trying to hold on to, but today you no longer feel the desire to. Or when you sit at your desk reading familiar lines and your body sighs in a way even you cannot explain. These moments seem normal, but they are actually signals, signs of a silent ending, a new door opening. And in the spirit of Machiavelli, they are reminders that you are beginning to step away from what no longer belongs to you, the very first sign of an inner victory approaching. Victory in Machiavellian psychology is not about rising above others, nor about life becoming perfect, nor about everything suddenly falling into place. True victory is when the unconscious begins to reject what no longer aligns with your true nature. Machiavelli once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." The soul always seeks its return to wholeness. When something no longer aligns with the true self, the unconscious will send signals for you to stop. Sometimes through restlessness, sometimes through exhaustion, sometimes through an inexplicable heaviness. I once heard the story of a woman named Laura who worked in customer service. She was someone everyone trusted. Patient, gentle, dedicated, every day she smiled, answered every call, and handled every problem with a calmness everyone admired. But for many months she carried home an emptiness she couldn't name. No conflict, no crisis, just a subtle heaviness in her chest whenever she thought about the next day. One morning on her way to work, Laura stopped at a familiar intersection. The hurried crowd, the sunlight falling across the road she had driven hundreds of times. And at that moment she realized her body no longer wanted to turn down that road. Not because she hated her job, but because a small whisper said, "You no longer belong here." She sat there for a long time, her hand still on the steering wheel, but her heart seemed to be leaving her old life. The next day, Laura requested time off. She tried an interior design class simply out of curiosity, and for the first time in months, she felt she could breathe. A year later, she changed careers entirely and said, "I thought I was burned out, but it turns out my soul was simply rejecting what was no longer right for me." When you no longer fit with something, you don't need to force yourself to leave. Your energy will leave first. That is when energetic rejection appears. The rejection not through words but through feeling. Imagine wearing a pair of shoes you've had for a very long time. At first they fit perfectly, comfortably, making you feel confident. But over time, your feet grow, your gait changes, you change, the shoes begin to hurt, to feel tight, yet you keep wearing them out of familiarity until one day the pain makes you stop. You take the shoes off and realize that what hurt you was never the shoes. It was the version of you that no longer exists. Energetic rejection is that moment you take the shoes off. Many people tell me they feel guilty when they suddenly lose motivation for something they once pursued. They blame themselves, believing they're weak, inconsistent, undisciplined. But if you look deeper, you'll see what exhausts you is rarely the difficulty of the task. It's the fact that it no longer aligns with who you are. You are not tired because you are failing. You are tired because you are being pulled away from a path that no longer belongs to you. That is the essence of your seeing this, because it's finally your turn to win. You are not seeing this by accident. You are seeing it because you are standing at the threshold between the old and the new, between who you were and who you are becoming, between the life you forced yourself to live and the life your soul is leading you toward. And when your energy begins to reject what no longer fits, it means the first victory is already happening. You are no longer forcing yourself to wear old versions just to be accepted. You are beginning to live as the person who is growing inside you. So if you feel tired, heavy, restless, or unable to continue something the way you once did, don't blame yourself. Don't see it as failure. It is your unconscious freeing you from what no longer belongs to you, because your life is preparing to move you into a new winning chapter. Number 2, when your rhythm changes without effort. And once you recognize that your inner energy is rejecting what no longer belongs to you, a second phenomenon will quietly unfold. Often so subtle you might miss it, yet it is the deepest evidence that you are entering a new winning phase. Your life rhythm begins to change without any effort from you. Machiavelli called this unconscious restructuring. The process in which the unconscious reorganizes your biological rhythms, habits, and ways of functioning to prepare for a new version of you to emerge. Machiavelli once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This natural shift in rhythm is the unconscious stepping forward to lead. What's interesting is that this change doesn't come from setting goals, making plans, being disciplined, or self-improvement. It doesn't show up as you forcing yourself to wake earlier, eat healthier, or think more positively. Instead, it happens very naturally, almost unconsciously. One morning you wake up earlier without an alarm. One evening you want to turn off your phone even though you used to stay up scrolling. On a quiet day, you crave a walk instead of sitting, crave stillness instead of noisy conversations. You don't force it. You don't try to change. You simply move to a different rhythm. And that is the sign of inner victory. When the outside world remains the same, but you are no longer the same person inside. In a Machiavellian therapy session, a woman named Amelia, who worked in marketing, shared that recently she had felt a strange change. Not exhaustion, not boredom, but a shift in her daily habits. She used to need coffee every morning, needed loud music to concentrate, and stayed up late to finish projects. But in recent weeks, she began waking up before her alarm. She no longer craved coffee, only warm water. At lunch, she wanted to walk outside instead of working straight through. In the evening, she naturally wanted to turn off her screen early and sit in silence for a few minutes. No one told her to. She had no healthy lifestyle plan. Everything simply happened as if an invisible hand was rearranging her life rhythm. At first, Amelia thought something was wrong. But the more she observed, the more she realized this new rhythm made her feel lighter, clearer, and peaceful in a way she had never known. A coworker told her, "You look so bright lately." Amelia simply smiled because deep down she knew this was not a change she created. It was the next version of herself appearing, and the unconscious preparing her for a leap. Life rhythm changes before life circumstances change. A rule Machiavelli emphasized clearly because the unconscious always moves before the conscious. It senses what is coming long before the mind understands. It adjusts your energy, behavior, and biology so you can align with the next chapter. As if your body and soul are cleaning, clearing, and rearranging everything at once to make space for a victory you cannot yet see, but the unconscious already feels. When your rhythm changes, you begin to think differently, not because you force yourself to think positively, but because old thoughts no longer match your frequency. Things that used to make you anxious now pass through like a breeze. Relationships that once consumed your mind no longer occupy space. Fears that held you back suddenly feel smaller. You don't fight to change yourself. You simply aren't the old self anymore. These small changes are the biological and psychological preparation for a quantum leap in your life. You start living according to the rhythm of the version that is growing, not the version that is holding you back. So if recently you've been sleeping earlier, eating differently, thinking differently, feeling less drawn to old drama, less triggered by things that used to irritate you, or feeling the urge to clean, slow down, or spend more time in silence, know that it's not random. It is a sign that you're rising into a new energetic level. It is your unconscious guiding you into training for your own victory. And that is why you're seeing this, because it is finally your turn to win. And what about you? Share in the comments. In what ways has your rhythm been changing lately? Do you feel small yet undeniable shifts happening inside you? Things you cannot name, but somehow know are leading you somewhere? Tell your story. It might just be the light that helps someone else realize they too are stepping into their own transformation. Number 3, when you begin choosing what's hard instead of what's easy, the hard choice instinct. Have you ever noticed something strange? The deeper you go into becoming a new version of yourself, the less satisfied you are with the easy choices. Even without trying, without forcing, without discipline, you naturally lean toward the harder path, but the one that feels right for your soul. This is the third sign and one of the clearest indications that it is finally your turn to win. Machiavelli called this the tension of opposites, the space where you must choose between what feels safe and what helps you expand. When you suddenly choose the hard thing, not because you must, but because something inside knows it is right, that is when your consciousness rises to a new level, and you'll see this in the smallest moments, ordinary moments. But behind their simplicity lies a massive shift. There is a beautiful image in Greek mythology, the story of Perseus. When faced with Medusa, the creature who could turn anyone to stone with a single glance, Perseus stood before two choices. 1. Run away, live safely, but remain small forever. 2. Walk into a challenge that could cost him his life. People think the hardest part was slaying Medusa, but no, the hardest part was choosing the path his soul knew he was born to walk. The moment Perseus decided to face her, not the moment he won, was the moment his destiny changed, because true victory always begins with a choice. Humans are the same. Victory does not begin at the finish line. It begins in the moment you choose the direction that is right, even if it is infinitely harder. This also happens in very ordinary ways. Another friend of mine named Nora used to stay silent in every argument just to keep the peace. But recently, when faced with a small injustice in her family, instead of being quiet, she calmly voiced what she felt. Her voice was not loud but steady, not angry but honest. Later she told me, I was afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of hurting someone, but I was more afraid of myself if I kept staying silent. For her, speaking the truth was the hardest choice, but also the right one. She chose the hard thing not to be stronger, but because the version inside her could no longer tolerate shrinking. And here is what may surprise you. When your soul is ready to evolve, you will choose the lessons appropriate to the version growing within you. Even if your rational mind still wants the easy option. In Machiavellian psychology, this is when the self begins to lead the ego. The ego wants safety, but the self wants growth. When the self becomes stronger, you simply can't keep wearing the old identity. You can try, but you'll slip out of it quickly, as if the universe itself is pushing you toward who you are truly meant to become. Machiavelli once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life can never be solved. they can only be outgrown. And that is why easy choices no longer feel right. You are not fixing yourself, you are outgrowing an old version. This shift appears in every area of life. You begin telling the truth instead of pleasing. You walk away from relationships that are fine but not right. You reject what makes you smaller. You start the things you once feared, avoided, or felt unworthy of. This all happens not because you've become more disciplined, but because you are no longer the person who needs to cling to safety. A larger version of you is waking up, and one day you will look back and understand that the greatest victories never begin at the finish line. They begin at the moment you choose the right direction. Even if it is infinitely harder, victory begins when you decide to leave, decide to step forward, decide to become who your soul has known you could be all along. It is no coincidence that you are drawn to bigger, deeper, more challenging paths. It is no coincidence that your heart pushes you toward the hard but true thing. That is not recklessness. That is the sign you are entering the chapter life has always reserved for you. And from that moment on, every hard choice you dare to make is proof that your winning journey has truly begun. Number 4, when you can look at the past without pain, and from the moment you stop fighting yourself, you suddenly notice a very strange change happening inside. The old stories no longer hurt the way they used to. They haven't disappeared. They are still there with form, with color, with echo, but they no longer have the power to tighten your chest. This is the kind of victory Machiavelli called emotional integration. When emotions once trapped in the unconscious are finally brought into consciousness and folded into your whole self. And this is the deepest sign that your life is beginning to shift in your favor. Looking at the past without pain does not mean forgetting. You still remember exactly what happened, the words that broke you, the silence that kept you awake, the decisions that altered the course of your life, but you remember without being pulled backward. You don't fall into old spirals, you don't blame, don't resent, don't fear repetition. The emotions no longer rise like crashing waves, they move lightly like wind passing through. Machiavelli once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." When you can look at the past and your heart stays soft, that is the moment you realize you are no longer defined by what once hurt you. This ability to remember with calm proves that you have risen above yourself, that you are no longer controlled by the past, a form of inner victory far greater than any external success. A very small example is when you accidentally hear a song associated with someone who once caused you unbearable pain. In the past, just a few notes could make you choke up, but today, when the song plays, you simply smile. Not because you're trying to be strong, but because your heart no longer responds the old way. It doesn't tighten, doesn't sting, doesn't bring guilt or emptiness. The song is still the song, but the story attached to it no longer collapses you. That alone is a silent victory that changes the direction of your inner life. Emotional science calls this memory reconsolidation, the process by which the brain rewrites a memory in a way that reduces its emotional charge. When pain happens, the nervous system pairs it with a survival response. But when you revisit the memory from a state of peace, the brain overwrites the old reaction, turning the memory into neutral data. Thus, something that once broke you now becomes just a small dot in the long story of your life. A woman once shared with the channel that it took her 3 years to move past a relationship that deeply wounded her. She avoided all related memories, even stayed away from places they had been together. But one afternoon, while cleaning her bookshelf, she accidentally found an old photo. She thought she would ache again, lose her breath as before. But no, the only thing she felt was relief. Not joy, not longing, just the truth. She had come much farther than the version of herself in that photo. She said, "I'm grateful it happened and grateful it ended." That is the moment Machiavelli called graduating a soul lesson. The simplest metaphor for this state is touching a healed scar. You still remember the accident, still know how much it hurt, but when you touch it, it no longer hurts. The mark remains, but it doesn't make you flinch or pull away. The body healed and the soul has the same ability, so when you begin finding that you can look back without pain, it is not numbness, not coldness, not pretending to be okay. It is a sign that you have entered a new level of consciousness. One where you are no longer operating from wounds but from growth. The past is no longer a prison, it becomes a resource. It no longer drags you down, it lifts you. And if you are in this moment, if you realize you can think about the past while your heart stays calm, understand this. It is not random, it is the clearest sign that your life is preparing to open a new chapter, a chapter where pain is no longer the primary fuel moving you forward, a chapter where you move from wholeness instead of fragmentation. This is how the universe tells you it is finally your turn to win. We have now traveled through more than half of this journey, and I want to thank you for being here with a heart brave enough to look back at itself. Before we continue, pause for a moment, take a slow breath, and feel the softness spreading inside as you realize you are no longer controlled by the past the way you once were. If these words touch the deepest parts of you, if you see yourself in the moments of remembering without breaking, go ahead and like the video. It's not just a tap on a screen, but a confirmation that you have already moved farther than the version of you from yesterday. Number 5, when you begin attracting bigger challenges, the arrival of bigger problems, there is something few people recognize. Life rarely gives rewards wrapped in roses or shining signals. It gives them in the form of challenges. But not challenges meant to frighten you. Rather, challenges meant to show you that you have entered a stage where you can now carry things that once crushed you. Machiavelli once wrote that when consciousness expands, a person will meet themselves in 1,000 disguises. And those disguises often show up as problems, responsibilities, difficult situations, not to break you, but to reflect the version of you that has become so much bigger within. As Machiavelli said, we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. When you grow, life must send experiences that match your new strength. The bigger the challenge, the less it is a sign of failure. It is the synchronization between mind and destiny, as if the universe is saying, I know you're ready. You may have already gone through this without naming it. In the past, a small criticism could keep you awake all night. A simple misunderstanding could make you want to disappear. A tiny change at work could send you into panic. But now much bigger things happen. And although you may feel tired, you no longer collapse the way you once did. You observe, you think, you look for ways to adjust. You no longer fear the things that once paralyzed you. That is not a coincidence. It is evidence that you have outgrown your old version. A friend of mine named Mary used to be someone who panicked easily in unexpected situations. Losing her keys would send her spiraling. A rescheduled meeting would unsettle her completely. But recently, when her family faced a major health crisis involving her father, Mary reacted entirely differently. She no longer ran around in confusion. She sat down, opened her notebook, listed everything that needed to be done, contacted doctors, divided responsibilities with family members, and reassured her mother with a calm, grounded voice she herself could hardly believe was hers. One night, when things finally settled, Mary burst into tears, not because she was weak, but because she realized she was no longer the girl who used to fall apart 3 years ago. The world had not become lighter. She had become stronger, and because she was stronger, life handed her a bigger test, but this time she passed. Machiavelli explained that as an individual enters a stage of inner evolution, the unconscious no longer protects them with easy situations. Instead, it places them in circumstances that require a corresponding level of maturity. Much like an athlete who reaches a new level no longer trains with warm-up exercises, they move on to harder, heavier, more demanding drills. not to break them, but to unlock capacities they never knew they had. Viola Davis, one of the rare actresses to win an Oscar, Emmy, and Tony, is a powerful example of this Machiavellian principle. Davis rose from a childhood marked by poverty, racism, and violence. Yet the more she grew, the greater the challenges she faced: constant rejections, being dismissed for her looks, her talent repeatedly overlooked despite her best efforts. The more challenges she encountered, the deeper her acting became. And that depth is what elevated her from a doubted actress to a Hollywood icon. Davis once said, "You cannot live to please everyone else. You have to choose your own life." From the moment she chose the harder path, the universe began sending her bigger opportunities that matched her expanded capacity, and the same is true for you. When life brings you bigger challenges, it is not a sign you are losing. It is a sign you have outgrown your old version, strong enough now to enter the chapter that has always belonged to you. Challenges appear only when your soul is ready to grow larger. So if recently you felt that life has become heavier, everything harder, challenges more frequent, do not assume it is a sign of misfortune. Remember, big problems do not arrive to knock you down. They arrive because you can now stand firm. When you were fragile, life was gentle. When you grew strong, it gave you the level that matched your strength, and that level is what confirms the inner power you may not yet fully recognize. And when you see these signs at the right moment, do not be surprised, because in the spirit of this message, you're seeing this because it's finally your turn to win. The big challenges appearing now are not here to block you, but to open a doorway wide enough for the mature version of you to walk through. Number 6, when you stop comparing yourself to others, comparison loses its power. And when you realize that bigger challenges come not to defeat you, but to mirror the stronger version of yourself, you will notice a 6th shift appear quietly. So quietly you may not even recognize it. You no longer compare yourself to anyone, not because you've trained long enough or reached enlightenment, but because you have begun operating from a different level of awareness. Machiavelli called this self-oriented consciousness, the state in which a person begins to function from the self. When you live from the self, you no longer see others as measuring sticks. You do not lose to anyone. You do not win over anyone. You simply evolve. You will see this in the smallest moments. One day you see someone achieving something, a job, a relationship, a new chapter in life. And instead of asking, "Why am I not there yet?" you simply smile, not to pretend, not to act mature, but because the invisible metrics that once pulled you no longer have any hold on you. That is when Machiavelli's words come alive within you. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. You see their success as a mirror, not for comparison, but for understanding where you are in your own journey. I once knew a young woman named Hannah. In the past, every time she scrolled through social media, she felt small. When someone traveled, she felt lacking. Someone got promoted, she felt behind. When someone got married, she felt out of sync. But during a period of intense inner transformation, the time she stopped people-pleasing, healed the shadows within herself, and stepped away from easy choices, she noticed something strange. Even when she saw others advancing faster than she was, she no longer felt pressure. She felt light, as if her soul was reminding her that her life does not follow the clock of the world. One day she told me, "I don't know why, but lately I just feel at peace with my own timing." That was the moment I knew she had entered the self state. Imagine standing by a lake. When the water is murky, all you see is the reflection of others. But when the water becomes clear, you see only the sky and yourself. When the mind is full of comparison, you live inside the noise of the world. When the mind quiets, you return to your center, and the world no longer sets your rhythm. The truth is, comparison only has power when you are still living from the persona. the part of you trying to prove something, protect an image, or become worthy of love. But when you live from the self, you no longer seek external approval because you have already approved of yourself first. You do not run at someone else's pace because you have heard your own rhythm again. You do not need someone to slow down for you to feel enough. You do not need to run faster to prove anything. You understand that each person stands at a different coordinate of their soul's journey. And you cannot compare the color of a sunrise to the color of a sunset. There is a Zen story I love. A disciple asked the master, "How can I stop comparing myself to others?" The master took him to a garden where peonies, roses, and wild flowers were blooming all at once. The master asked, "Do you see any flower trying to bloom like another?" The disciple shook his head. The master smiled. "That is the way of the universe. Every flower blooms in its own season. Only humans think they must bloom in someone else's." The disciple was silent for a long time, and from that day on, he stopped trying to catch up with anyone. So will you. One day you will realize something incredibly important. When comparison loses its power, you enter the phase where life begins opening in the way most beneficial for you, because your energy is no longer leaking towards someone else's story. It returns to nourish your own path. When you stop comparing, you no longer move sideways. You move forward into your own life. If you feel yourself becoming more at peace with your journey, less focused on others, less pressured by their success, understand that this is not indifference. It is a sign you have returned to your true center, and from that center, your victory begins right now. If these words resonate with you, if you feel yourself stepping out of the invisible measurements of the world and returning to your own rhythm, leave one word in the comments, the word freedom. It will be a gentle reminder that you are entering a life measured only by your own soul. Number 7. When you begin acting without needing motivation, quiet, consistent action. There is something that sounds paradoxical yet is more accurate than anything. You know you have changed not when you feel better, but when you begin doing what must be done, even on days when you feel nothing at all. Machiavelli called this state inner alignment. When consciousness and the unconscious move in the same direction, you do not need to get in the mood. You do not wait for inspiration. You do not seek motivation. You simply act naturally as breathing, gently as an invisible movement along your spine. No fireworks, no hype, no grand explosion, only a quiet stability deep within you that knows exactly what needs to be done. Perhaps you used to act in cycles. On motivated days, you worked intensely, and on tired days, you did nothing. But at a very strange point, you notice yourself waking up early without an alarm. You tidy your room not because you must, but because you want a clear space for a clear mind. You exercise not to be disciplined, but because your body begins returning to its natural rhythm. This is not motivation. This is maturity. A viewer once shared that for years she could not maintain any habit for more than 3 days, but in the phase when she entered deep inner transformation, she suddenly began journaling every night, not because of a 30-day challenge, not because she wanted to improve herself, simply because each night her hand would open the journal, write, release her thoughts as effortlessly as if her body knew it needed this. When I asked why, she said, "It's not that I wanted to. It's that I was the one who writes." The answer was simple, but it revealed the essence of this stage. Action no longer depends on emotion, but on the new identity forming within. Imagine pushing a boat on land. At first, you must use all your strength just to make it move slightly, but once the boat touches water, a gentle push is enough and it moves on its own. Your quiet consistency is the moment your lifeboat touches the water. You no longer need brute force. You only need rhythm, and the water will do the rest. Neuroscience calls this neuroplastic integration. When a habit is repeated long enough from a calm state, not stress, not pressure, the brain forms new pathways. Actions no longer drain your willpower. They become natural responses. In other words, you do not need motivation because your nervous system has learned this is who you are. What is interesting is this. You will Notice that this change does not show up on days you feel powerful, but on days you feel normal, no climax, no excitement, no breakthrough moment, and yet you still do the work, you still care for your body, you still complete what must be done, you still take each step even if no one sees you or applauds you. These seemingly empty days become the foundation for every victory that follows. Machiavelli once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And that quote becomes fully alive in this phase. No more promises, no more grand plans, no more explosive days followed by collapse. Only one thing remains. You act because this is the person you are becoming. Small actions repeated quietly and consistently. That is the clearest sign of true inner strength. If your life used to run on inspiration, it now runs on understanding. The understanding that you do not need to win today, you only need to continue, one step, then another, and little by little you slip away from your old self without even noticing. And one very gentle day, you will realize you have done things you once believed you could never maintain. Not because you became more disciplined, but because you are no longer the person who lived only on temporary motivation. You have become someone who acts from identity, from the deeper self emerging within you. So if recently you found yourself acting more steadily, doing the right things without emotional pushes, moving gently but consistently, know this is not random. It is a clear sign you have entered the chapter where victory no longer comes from intensity, but from maturity. As you journey through these 7 signs, you will notice a very soft truth. The victory Machiavelli spoke of was never about shining moments for others to applaud. It is a silent growth where you begin to live from your center instead of reacting to life, no longer holding on to what has expired, no longer following rhythms that do not belong to you, no longer fearing the hard path nor being held hostage by the past. You move as yourself, not more, not less, and then you understand that true victory is not your turn to win something from the world, but your turn to become the person your soul has been waiting for all along. And if you are seeing this at the exact moment your life is shifting, perhaps this is the reminder that the old chapter has ended more gently than you realized, because in the end victory is not a mountain peak. It is the moment you stand upright in your truth and keep walking even when the road ahead is not fully clear. If this message touches you, share it so others standing at their new beginning may find their own reflection. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to journey together toward the strongest version of who you were born to become.